Ladies and gentlemen, it is an absolute pleasure to welcome a young lady who has an amazing gifting, amazing idea of how to connect the dots between healing, between the arts and music, and her faith. Julz Muya, welcome to the God and Gigs show. How are you?
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's really awesome to be able to put all of myself in one space. Usually there are many different pieces, so all in one space is really awesome. So I can't wait to dig in with you.
Well, this is God and Gigs, so we do put it all in one space. We put all of our faith, everything we grew, that we're growing in faith in, but we also put it in the very practical. That's always my tagline. I don't know if they even heard it at the beginning of the podcast, but I always say, with timeless spiritual principles to solve temporary creative problems. So, that's really what this is. We're always talking about how these things intersect, and you have an amazing story, an amazing platform that you're building. But first, for those people who are meeting you for the first time, you have to do the quick 30-second elevator pitch, and you have to tell them your entire life story in 30 seconds, right? So I'm going to put you on the spot here as well. So if someone is meeting you for the first time here on this podcast, can you give them a little sense of who you are in that little snapshot type of way?
Okay. So my name is Julz Muya, and I like to say, first of all, I'm a child of God. That will never change when I'm this age or this age when I'm 80. I'm still going to be just a simple child of God. So everything else I do, like I'm an author, I'm a speaker, a musician, a life coach, and all of that is just the things that I do. That's not necessarily a reflection of who I am. I mean, if I stop doing all the things I'm doing, I'll still know who I am, and that's a child of God. But for the sake of people who want to dig into really what I do, what I'm aspiring into, is that I'm going to be soon accredited to be um, a spiritual music therapist. So I think that really pretty much speaks for itself. I use music to help people heal from complex trauma, and which is like my life journey. And I think we're going to dig into it so you can see like how I got from point A to where I am right now is all a part of my healing journey.
Wow. So yes, it immediately sparks my interest because I always go personal. It's very hard to kind of like just not go personal when it comes to things like this. And I think about my own mental health journey. I think about my own spiritual journey and my music journey. So I guess for you, let's start with music because I saw that you were a pianist. We share that. And so can you tell me a little bit about first how the arts and music entered into the picture of your background? Did you start as a musician at a young age? Did you start learning in church? Like, how did you first get the inspiration to be a musician?
Well, my inspiration comes from my dad because he was very musical. I mean, he never played instruments, but he always had music playing in the background. He had a record, with the, what do you call it, the turntable, not a
Turntable, yeah.
turntable.
No, no,
Yeah,
you're right. You talk about the
yeah,
vinyl. We can go
with
back
the
in the day.
vinyl, and he just, I think he instinctively knew I respond to music because when music is playing, I was dancing. I just wanted the spotlight. I would sing, and it wasn't so. Every time he went out of the country, he'd bring me instruments. And I still remember my first Casio, a tiny little keyboard, and I would play, and it had a demo, and I would learn how to play all the songs by ear. So since I was a young child, 6, 7, 8 years old, I remember piano was my very first instrument that I learned to play mostly by ear. And then but because I'm from Nairobi, I'm from Kenya. There's not Back then there wasn't really access to music teachers who could teach you how to play. So I think I was born. I say I was born in the wrong place, I guess, just because I didn't have access to be taught music, and because I always say, man, I would have been a concert pianist by now. But it was when I moved to the States at 17 years old to go to college. That was back in '97. I was part of an international Christian fellowship, and I learned how to play from all of the international students. I could tell you post like 90% of the Japanese kids knew how to play classical piano. I mean, that's just part of their growing up. They're forced to have to play piano, so I would just learn all the chords and would teach each other all the music. So that's where I really honed in my gift to really play. to play piano,
I gotta
which,
ask real
yeah.
quick, when you mentioned the international, that had to be incredible. Number one, you just said that you immigrated to the United States at 17, and then you're with this group of international students. So I just wanted to quickly just ask you, like, what was that experience like being around? Number one, the culture change, right? I mean, you were growing up in one culture, and then coming over here to the United States, and then being surrounded with all these other cultures. Did that have an impact on you at all? Like being exposed to this whole new. I'm assuming it was a whole new world for you.
It was a whole new world. That's like a whole other talk that I can do, just talking about coming from a third world country to America, just all the culture shock, seeing people from all over the world. And I mean, I had to shed a lot of, beliefs of what I thought America was. And, I just, for us, when we're taught like America is so immoral, like there's just immorality everywhere. Just people just dressed up this way and that way, just you could dress like in, like bikinis and everything was just so like, oh my goodness, how are
That's
you
all. That's
wearing
all you
that?
thought you'd see.
Shorts?
You just
Yeah.
thought you'd see nothing but people in
Yeah.
bikinis.
I was like, there's no way these people are saved. There's no way. I mean, I remember going to church and seeing girls in shorts and you could see everything, cleavage and everything. That is not of the Lord. I was rebuking everything where I was going. I just was like, just a shock of what someone would say that they're Christian and they would wear like Daisy Duke shorts. That to me was mind boggling, that you could be that and say you're saved. For us, we had to be modest, your speech, everything. You can't listen to secular music. My
Oh,
goodness,
oh no, yes.
we did not go to clubs, we don't, I mean, it was, for me, it was a definition of what a Christian is. I had to expand my thinking of what Christianity is. It wasn't until much later when I started to really see God for who he is, like having a personal relationship with him. That was, we was hard, because we do everything in a group, in church, everybody's dancing, everybody's raising their hand and everything. But you go to church here and it's like, you raise your hand. It's like, not everybody is doing it,
Yeah,
like
there's
the
so much
churches I
more.
was going to.
I don't want to say variety, but there is like this understanding. I guess you start to realize that there's this cultural variety and spiritual. There's spiritual like levels that people were at. Where yes, I mean they're coming to church, but they're not. God talks about in the Bible all the time about how we are being saved. We're progressively right learning about God and learning how to express ourselves and learning how to follow His ways in different paths and different levels, and some are babies and some are mature, and you were being exposed to all of it at the same time.
All of it at the same time. Yeah,
uh
I didn't know how self-righteous I was, honestly, until I got here. Like, I thought my spirituality was more superior than Americans, or than, I had to shed all so much of that, because we come from a collective society to an individualist society, where everybody, it's like, it's just my religion, my relationship, it's everybody is me, me, me. So I had to start for the first time looking at me. I'd never had to like really see who I was. I never had to focus on, I had no self-awareness, if you want to put it that way. I had to
wow,
start being self-aware, which
that's
was new.
amazing.
Yeah.
So now if you were talking about that, I don't know, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I was wanted to jump on, just I really was curious about your concept of coming over here. And then you just mentioned some things about self-awareness, and one of your other areas that you said you're very interested in is trauma, is mental health, is how people recover from that. So what sparked that part of this kind of triangle of things that you were trying to share? Was, I mean, and I want to invite you to be as general or as deep as you want, but it's kind of like wonder like, where did that desire to minister to people come from?
It was when you go to college, you have to take general education. You take your general classes, and that included, you have to take psychology in community college. And so when I was taking my psychology class, and though they started to talk about the brain, feelings, emotions, and that's when I was like, whoa, I have feelings, I have emotions, I have a brain, and it works like this. These are panic attacks. I remember suffering a panic attack one time, and I didn't know what it was. I thought I was losing my mind. I thought I was having a heart attack. I remember going to hospital, and I was in flight mode completely, thought I was going to lose my mind. And I remember just sitting in the waiting room, And the doctors come and they checked my blood pressure, checked everything, and they were like, you're okay. But I was like, no, but I was dying. Literally, like a few minutes ago, I know I was in the brink of death. You know, I don't know, people who've had a panic attack, they know your heart racing and all of that. You know, I didn't know what that was until I took my psychology class, and then they were explaining about anxiety, about depression and things like that, which we didn't have counselors like going to school. You know, I was in a boarding school, and that's the normal thing. You go to boarding school, you're away from your parents, you're away from your siblings, you're in an environment that's meant to almost dehumanize and torture you. You lose your identity, and that's another topic on its own. How boarding school really messes with your mind, and it's like we had a dictator headmistress who really tortured. It's like it was a place of torture, I can call it. And that's where most of my trauma has come from, is my basic needs not being met. One is physical touch, because it was an all-girls school, and the headmistress didn't want us to be like lesbians or whatever. So she would tell us not to touch each other. You can't do each other's hair. You have to walk a certain space from each other, and you know, no hugging, no all of that. And so I remember going 4 years without physical touch, without being held or hugged. And that's a basic need. And later on, it'll come as trauma, it'll show up as trauma, you know, just hunger, just feeling hungry, because the food is just not enough, you know. And so I remember just suffering hunger, fear, cold, you know, because there wasn't heating. And we were in a remote area where there was not, and it was freezing. The nights were cold, and you're just cold. You're bathing with freezing cold water. So all of that accumulated trauma, which we call complex trauma because it's just accumulated over time. That's where the panic attacks were coming from. My body was finally in a place of rest, but my brain and my body was still experiencing it from the past. You know, that's PTSD, if you want to call it, because you're stuck in that place or you're stuck in flight mode.
Right.
So you have to heal from all of that. Yeah.
Unbelievable. Like just the fact that you had to face that and then process it. And like you said, your brain is fighting, and your spirit, I'm sure, especially in your faith space, your faith, and having to say, okay, God clearly was, it's weird to say this when we talk about trauma and talk about bad things happening to good people, right? But God is present, always present. But then you have to wrestle with, well, why didn't he rescue me? Why did this happen to me? And so Christians, we always have this struggle, right? Where we say, okay, well, God has delivered me and I'm more than a conqueror, but then these bad things happen and I still have to overcome them. I have to overcome the thoughts. I have to overcome the mental strongholds that you're talking about. So I guess now we're at the third section, right? You talked a little bit about your mental health journey and fighting those thoughts and the music. And so how does your faith now come into it? How did you, apply your faith in God? How did he help you specifically in that? Was it something that kind of came after? So how did that actually enter the picture, and did it help you overcome those thoughts that you were dealing with?
Yeah, so I knew that music was powerful because of how he rescued me from like the damage that's been done in my brain. Because remember, you're going in an all-girls school, so you don't ever experience men or boys. That's something it's so foreign to you. You don't have an opportunity to experience that. And so I remember I had an uncle. He's a pedophile now, we realized, because he traumatized, and he was in the background doing a lot of really bad things to a lot of the girls and the boys in our family. He's like a distant uncle, but I remember going to his house, and the first time I was introduced to intimacy between a man and a woman was through violent rape. He showed us, like, he said, let's watch a movie, but in this movie was literally violent rape. That's how I know as what is sex. That was my introduction to that. So I remember the music was playing, and I'm watching this man doing really just crazy things. So I remember those images getting stuck in my head. I remember going to school and I couldn't take that music that was playing in my head, and those images, they kept playing over and over and over, and it was so hard to get it out. So that was December. So 6 months later, there was a guy who came to visit our house, and um, he was a guitar player. And I remember he said, I want to sing for you a song. And I remember he sat with his guitar and he sang this song, and his voice was so beautiful. And and I remember that song playing in my head, how he was strumming the guitar. And it was like the strings and the music and his voice all hit me all at once. And it just, and so all of a sudden, whatever I was trying to get rid of, the music and the violence in my head, was replaced by this beautiful voice and the guitar. That's when I knew that I can focus my mind on something new. I can focus on his playing the guitar, and then my aspirations to want to play guitar. So my whole mind was like, I am going to be a guitar player. I'm going to be a singer, and I'm going to be a counselor. And I remember going to camp, and the counselors there were helping me, were counseling me through all the pain that I've been going through, all that stuff. And I was like, wow, they did such an awesome job with, with helping me with where I was. So I linked counseling and music, and I together, because I knew one day I'm going to be a singer and a counselor. I know those two things. I was at 15 years old.
Wow.
That was my conclusion. I don't know how I'm going to do those two things, but I know I'm going to be a counselor and a singer. And so, so going back to school, when I was alone, I would every time I would see those images of that violent pornography in the music, I would replace that with the songs that I was hearing and my aspirations for what I wanted to be as a singer. And it somehow erased those thoughts. Music was powerful in helping me focus on something different. It's like I think they call it, in people who study the brain, they call it the neural pathways.
Yes.
So you had this neural pathway that you can eliminate, and you can develop a new neural pathway in your brain.
I gotta ask you, you just brought up somebody. I don't know if you ever heard of Dr. Caroline Leaf, but
I think so. She
she's
studies the brain.
yeah, she's a Christian
a brain
neuroscientist. Yes,
yeah.
and that's what she talks about. She talked about how those little cells, the little nerve cells, are little. When the Bible talks about thoughts, she's like, thoughts are real things. They are made of those little cells in our brains. And like you said, you were stimulated the wrong way, but then you were able to take something else. And the way I remember she described it in her book or some of her studies is that you just simply start to shrink with the word of God and with prayer and with discussion and reminding yourself, shrink those thoughts. When the Bible talks about like take captive a thought, and shrinking those things down and replacing them. That's a big thing. It's like you have to replace it with something that's positive, like Philippians says, right? Think on these things, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are good report. Like the Bible knows, God knows what the brain works and how we have to use it. And so it's amazing that you had that moment with that guitarist and music becoming that thing that helped you renew your mind, right? It helped you to replace those thoughts. So now you're in a position where that pain is now your problems have now become your purpose, right? Now you can go out with a mission for that. So tell me how you're working that out now. How are you? I've seen that you have what's it called? I'm sorry, just got caught up in my words. A platform called Resilient Souls.
Yes.
And so now you're actually stepping out to help other people. So how do you help people to recover and to restore their minds and to work on this part of their lives?
So Resilient Souls is a nonprofit organization that supports individuals who've gone through domestic violence, human trafficking, these complex traumas that just are in our bodies, and they're stored there. And usually talk therapy doesn't help a lot of the times. So we help people who've come to the end of their rope. Like they're just like, this is the end. I either take my life or I'm done. And so I partner with Lisa Majors. She's the founder, and we kind of combined forces when she was about a year into starting her nonprofit. And so I joined her as the vice president. And what we do is we'll take people through what we call a mending the soul. Mending the soul is like almost a 24 weeks of trauma healing, and it's spiritual. It's the word of God. We're teaching people how trauma happens and how you could heal. So we've been gone since 2019 is when the organization started, and so we're a baby organization, just barely starting to get our feet wet and raise money to help other people go through it. Lisa, she's the one who's really, I think, the person who's so good in group therapy, like the group sessions. For me, I've kind of taken the role of being the poster child or the spokesperson. So I'm the one who just basically tells my story, marketing, advertising, communication. That's mostly my role in the organization. And she concentrates more on the one-on-ones and especially doing the group classes. And she's just so amazing in that. And so I think we just found our roles, and my role is important too, because people need to know about resilient souls, and I'm not shy about speaking about my story. And that's the part that really helps me, just performing. Like I'll go and I perform my songs, I'll tell my story. It's really moving. And I refer people to other counselors and other chaplains who have gone through our program, and they get at least a one-on-one time to talk to somebody.
That's beautiful. And it's really powerful that you just mentioned your performance, that your music, and that, I think a lot of us creatives and performers, musicians and specifically, we do need to have a purpose beyond just, not to say that music and even worship is not in and of itself enough, right? It doesn't mean that you always have to have a nonprofit or something that you're directing to people. But I do think, I've said this in other blogs that I've written earlier, that sometimes we expect music to do all the work. Like we expect people to walk into a worship service, right? And yes, God can heal you instantly. Yes, you could walk into a worship service and God can use that moment to really just wash away a lot of the guilt and the shame and the trauma. In one moment, He can touch you when you hear a song, when you're lifting and you're lifting your hands in worship. But more times, often, more than often, right? It's not just that moment. It's what happens after the worship service. It's what happens after the concert. So what I really love about that is that you already are thinking, okay, I'm going to use my music and my songs and my testimony to touch people, but that's not where the story ends. It has to have a next step. Like after you hear the music, after you've been touched, after you feel the urge to deal with this, where do you step next? Do you feel like that's kind of like where your music career is going now, where it has like a bigger purpose other than just promoting your own music?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's what Make Music and Thrive is. So we have this nonprofit that we started, but I realized that I'm not using my gift with Resilient Souls, because I'm not all about marketing and performing. So I have to teach people how to build healthy coping skills for life. And so that's why if you go to my website, one of the things I say is, learn from a pro so you can play like a pro. But my thinking behind it is, if I can get people to actually want to play piano and have fun with it, they're more likely to stick with it. And that means they're building healthy coping skills for life. And also I want them to understand the neuroscience behind what they're doing. Because for me, most recently, in fact, this week, I got triggered, and then it took me way back into the past. So I got stuck in high school or whatever. I got stuck in my PTSD, because that's what PTSD does. It all of a sudden you get triggered and you're back to la la land where you are, and you can't come back to the present. So when I'm teaching how to play piano, it's that you're taking your fingers and you're actually like playing something. It's reminding your brain, no, you're here, you're present, you're not in your past. You're here. It, like whatever has happened, it's gone, it's in the past. You're not there. So you're teaching your brain to not revert back to where you were. So because the temptation is to drink something, to use cannabis, or to use and medicate with drugs or sex or anything. So what it does is, when you're playing, your brain is like, I'm here, I'm present. The melody is sweet. It's motivating you to actually play. And so I think the whole week I've had to play my piano. I've had to write in my journal. I've had to exercise. I've had to call somebody. I used all of those tools. And that's what I teach people. The person who's coming to play and learn piano with me, they're learning like all the tools that you're going to use when you're recovering from PTSD is to remind you that you're here, you're present. And so today is when I finally recovered. I think it was since from Tuesday till today is when it's finally my brain was like, oh, okay, I guess we are here. We're not in the past. We're not going through the traumatic experience.
It took 5 or 6
It
days,
took,
but that's the key
yeah,
about
yeah, you have
repeating
to
it.
repeat every day,
Yes,
and
got
not
it.
using, because I was so tempted. You have no idea. I want to be real with everybody. I was like, I wanted to take something. I had called a friend. I was like, you have a dispensary. Like, you need to give me something right now. And I think the Lord, I don't know how he worked it out, because because I knew I was going to spiral down. I gave him $20. I said, go to the dispensary. This is what I need. The next day, something happened where he was like, man, he texted me, I've had a morning. I can't, it just didn't work out, where his day was sucked and he was not able to give me the stuff from the dispensary. So I was forced to have to use my tools. I am losing it. I'm going crazy. Like, so I had to be like, call my friend. I was crying. I was just using my piano, writing. And then the Lord was encouraging me. It'll pass. Just keep using your tools, keep praying. And then I called a bunch of people. I was like, you need to be praying for me right now. I'm going back. I'm losing it. It's like, and it was just one trigger, but I finally, like today, I woke up, went to the gym, and I was like, I had a smile on my face, like nothing had happened. But if they only knew where I was, and the fact that it was not available in my house, I don't have alcohol or drugs or anyone. I'm not living with anyone, so I had nothing else except to lean on the word of God and the music, and it was his word, it was prayer, it was me calling on the angels to help me get out of it. And that's what, and the fact that I'm not like sitting on a high horse teaching people these things. I'm telling them, I'm feeling every day. I'm living it. This is my thorn in my flesh. I feel like my PTSD is the thorn in my flesh. And so I can teach people, like, man, that was last week. I mean, this was just today. I didn't even know how I was going to do this interview, because I was just like lost, because if it was yesterday, I would not have been able to do it. I would have been in a
That was
whole
God's,
different space.
that's God's divine timing, even in that. And I love the fact that you're being so transparent, because I think, again, we're speaking to musicians and creators who oftentimes have to fake it. We oftentimes will get on a stage and say, right now, like you said, you had to perform, or you had to sing, or you had to even go up and minister to someone, and you're thinking, okay, it's all about them. Lord, just help me get through this moment. Help me say this. Help me do this. But in the meantime, you're feeling empty. You're feeling lost. You're feeling blue. You're feeling torn apart. And like you said, scattered all over the place because of what triggered you. And I think one thing that really hit me when you mentioned the being present, right? Playing. I cannot tell you how many times I'm upstairs right now. My downstairs is where my piano is. I cannot tell you how many times that I probably woken my wife up at 2 o'clock in the morning. We don't have any headphones on that. It's a grand piano. It's not a keyboard. So I cannot tell you how many times I've had to go into worship and just playing just what you just mentioned is a perfect picture of it. Like, I just need to be here. This is not for anybody else to hear. No one will ever hear it. I'm not turning on the recorder. This is just me and God. This is me and my thoughts. My piano becomes my prayer, because I cannot express what I'm feeling out loud, or to a pastor, or to a deacon. And like you said, or any substance, anything that's going to try to make it feel better, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. It has to be through the piano. And I love the fact that you can go back to you're teaching people how to play. I've had plenty of students that come to me with the same thing. They're not going to become musicians. I think I even read on your website that, if you're not trying to be a pro, if you're not trying to be a classical pianist, that's not why we sit down at the piano. Like, you could just play 3 notes, but if it's, just something that will remind you that you love God and God loves you, and that you are present in this moment, that's so powerful. And the fact that you had to use that is amazing. I even thought for a second, just to kind of riff on that, it's funny you mentioned the backwards, because I know a lot of us listen to music as something to go back, right?
Ah,
We
the
remember,
temptation.
they
Oh,
remember the love song, or we remember the
oh,
moment.
the temptation.
Right. And
Oh,
it's really powerful that you said that, though. I want to stick on that. Like you said, playing the piano now. You didn't say, because I've done this myself, and we're being very transparent for everybody that's listening and watching. I've gone back to listen to songs because repeating that song over and over again, I thought was kind of like, ministering to me. But in a way, it's kind of doing what you said. It was kind of more like rehearsing my pain from the past. And at one point, yes, playing that song 1,000 times did minister to me. But for me to play it now, if I'm delivered from that, I don't really want to go back and play the song that I had to play 1,000,000 times, because it's like I'm rehearsing that moment and I should be past that moment. Whereas when the Bible says sing a new song unto the Lord, that sounds more like what you're talking about. You're talking about not rehearsing the past, but you're talking about moving forward.
moving forward
And
and being in the present. And also, like this Sunday, they had asked me, I don't really perform at church. Well, I don't lead worship at church. I'm kind of the person, they're like, man, if there's nothing going on, I mean, if there's nobody else, then Julz will
you
play
call it.
or do something. And so it happened to be this Sunday, the worship leader had asked me, I mean, like, Julz, please do something, even though it's like half of the set at the end. And the fact that I had to choose songs, and the fact that I had to prepare for Sunday, I had no choice but to have to sit there and just try to pick songs. And because the deadline, like the other worship leader needs the song, they need the song. So all year long I haven't been really having to prepare for Sunday, but the fact that I had something I had to do and I had to prepare it forced me to not just sit there, and because I just wanted to sit in my couch and just zonk out into nowhere land. And but they were waiting. They're like, bring the songs, we need the chords so we can print out the songs. And it forced me to have to say, be present, you're here, you're still required to do this, you have to keep moving forward. And I was tempted to also be like, I can't do worship on Sunday, you guys take it over. But then that means the enemy would win, because the enemy wants nothing but to put me down and keep me in that place, because then he can start to control my mind. He says, no, I have you. But I said, I have to move forward. I'm not going to cancel Sunday. And the fact that I chose my 4 songs. And once I sent it to them, then I was like, okay, I did it. I'm ready. I'm ready to do Sunday. And I think I wish people know, like, the struggle worship leaders go through. I mean, now that you're listening to this, it's such a struggle. And people come and they're like, oh, that song, like, how did you even play it? The complaints, you're like, can you just pick better songs? Or
Oh Lord.
like, just,
Look,
oh my God,
there's so many, like, for us to go down this road would be like we would have to spend another 4 hours, and then
another, yeah.
we get all the calls from people who are like, but that's what you're supposed to do. Like, yes, but this is why when I wrote my book and created the podcast, Julz, one of the things I made very clear is that this is not for people who don't understand. This is just to the creatives and the musicians and the worship leaders who are already in it, because other people will never understand that. And that's not a dig on them. That's not a oh well, we're high worship leaders and musicians and you just don't get it. Like, you don't understand. But I wanted to make sure we, like, kind of like what you're saying, like, you want to reach the people who went through what you went through, right? And so for us as creators and musicians, I want to reach the people that are going through what you're talking about, that struggle, that Sunday morning when you don't feel it and you have to reach deep down and say, okay, like David encouraged himself in the Lord, right? You have to find some encouragement somewhere, because it's not going to come from you listening to yet another worship leader, because they're going through their own battle, right? So we have to find these other abilities to connect with God, to stay focused and present. And for me, a lot of it has been journaling. It has been learning, like, what is my way of worship outside of church? What are my non-church songs that actually help me to focus? And usually, like you said, it doesn't turn out to be like the song that we're singing every week, because that's what we're singing every week.
Yeah.
So it's going to be my personal worship, my personal study, and my personal ability to pull up a verse when I'm feeling that kind of that weight of my thoughts. So I love that you're really just living this out week by week and day by day.
day by day.
I want to ask you while we're talking about this, even in terms of your desire for the future, because I can see this platform being huge one day, but of course you're not doing it for fame or for, but what is your dream for your platform? What would be something if you said to God, "Hey, Lord, please grant me this desire," because God, He says, who grants the desires of your heart. So, what is your heart's desire for your ministry, for Make Music and Thrive? What would be like the thing that would make everything look amazing if it happened in your 5 year, 10 year plan or something like that?
Yeah. So my 5 year, 10 year plan is just duplicate myself. There's just not enough musicians out there who are teaching. There are people out there doing gigs, but they're not teaching. And the people who are teaching the way they were taught, like through the classical way. And nobody wants to. A lot of people don't want to be stuck reading music. So, and they just want to play and have fun. But there is this program called Kinder Music, and they basically have the whole entire program accredited where you can learn Kinder music and then train other people how to do it. So my goal is to have a practice which I'm opening soon. I'm getting a grant called the California Dream Grant, and they're helping minorities or people of low income who would never be able to start a business, and they're giving you funds to start your business. So I'm opening a practice soon. I'll have my own space. I'll be practicing Kinder music and having people come in, learn what I'm doing so that they can also learn and do the same thing when they grow up. So I want to bring lots of children, lots of families, and they see, wow, this is your profession. You just get to play music all day long and help other people. I'm like, yeah, and it's fun. Like I get to do this as a job. I can't wait to have families come in and help them bond with each other, learn all these instruments, and for kids to be inspired to know that this is a career path for them too. Because when you get them when they're young, then they can somehow aspire to become that as well. There's just not enough music teachers, or the music programs are not enough that are teaching people that you can use music not just for performing, like being like J-Lo or Beyonce on stage. There are other careers that musicians have that are beyond just performance. It may not be the most glamorous or something that will make you rich and famous and wealthy, but it's still fulfilling. Like I'm like one of the most fulfilled people that I know. And I'm not like wealthy, in terms, I mean, I'm wealthy in terms of like, I live in America and I can get money from the government to help me do this. That's a lot of wealth. I'm wealthier than so many other
Right.
people
We're
around
the
the
we're the one
world.
percent of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah,
My
absolutely.
God. I mean, like when I look at all the things that I have, wow, someone will look at me and say, wow, you're rich. By American standards, it may not seem that way, but where I come from, like the rest of the world, we are super, super duper wealthy. So I don't try not to compare myself with other musicians or what they're doing, because this is my calling. It's a very small thing that I'm doing, but I'm fulfilled. I'm happy. I get to spend tons of time with my son. I can bring him to my studio. We can do music together. This is how we bond with each other. We bond over music. So my goal is to help other people to bond with their families, to bond with their kids with music, and hopefully inspire the next generation of music therapists. There's not enough music therapists around the world. Yeah, to just have this movement, healing trauma through music.
Powerful, powerful. And I did see a couple of Instagrams of your son and him saying the 23rd Psalm. And I was like, that's right. Teach them up in the way they should go, right? And it's amazing. I taught elementary school for 8 years, music in elementary school and public school. And that's absolutely why I did it at that age, because if you get them early, like you said, if you start this early, where before any of these negative influences, whether it be around the arts, right? They see the wrong side of the arts, they see the glamour, and they see all this other stuff that has nothing to do with really being a great performer and a great person. And then, of course, the spiritual side, if you train them up with that, They'll never depart. It will come back to them time and time again, and they'll have a place to go when things hit them. So I love this conversation. This really did. I knew as soon as I read all you're about that this you are right in the heart of God and Gigs, where you are teaching, like you said, but you're touching the world with your art, with your performances, and with your mission and your purpose. So for those who want to find you, they want to continue to be in touch with you, they want to support your mission, tell them where they can find you, either on social or on the internet, and any
Yes.
websites they can find you at.
Yeah, so my website is a baby. It's growing right now. It's makemusicandthrive.com. I'm hoping to start writing my blog there, then they can get to learn more about what I do. But I'm teaching in-person lessons, and that's where I do that. They can find us on resilientsouls.org. We do have online classes if they want to help them heal from trauma. And then of course I'm on all the different Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Julz Muya, Julz Muya. And yeah, and then also my book as well.
Oh, we didn't. Yes, talk about that. You're an author.
Book, yeah, that's just my healing journey. It's called 40 Days and Nights, and it's on Amazon. And you just go and type my name on the search box, just type in Julz Muya, and my book will come up. And yeah, you can support that as well. So many ways to support me, just starting out.
No, but you're doing amazing work already. I can tell you, as a fellow creative, again, I'm the same way, musician, writing a book, starting a mission, starting a business. It seems like nobody's paying attention at the beginning, and you're thinking like, it's like God, is giving you that little widow's mite, right? It's all you have, and you're offering all you have, and yet every single person you're touching makes an impact. This particular podcast, someone's listening right now, you're listening, and they heard a story that resonated with them, and that ripple is going to impact hundreds of thousands of people, because God says his word never returns void, right? It's going to go out. It's going to reach the people that it's supposed to reach. And you and I, even when we feel like we're tiny little, we're little pebbles in the pond, God has no little pebbles, right? It's like there's no such thing as like little in the kingdom. We're all positioned in the right place. So thank you so much for sharing your story and your mission, Julz. This has been a blessing. I hope we can connect again. But everybody else, they're going to follow those links in the show notes in the description, and we're going to make sure that they stay in touch with you and make use of your resources. So God bless you. Thanks so much for being a part of the God and Gigs show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.